Gracie Jiu-Jitsu rocks. Welcome to the Gracie Jiu-Jitsu Rocks podcast, a podcast dedicated to Gracie Jiu-Jitsu and all things Gracie, including self-defense, competition, anti-bullying, women's self-defense and empowerment, nutrition, and most especially, the people involved in Gracie Jiu-Jitsu. This podcast is for the average Joe. It's for anyone who practices, trains, teaches, or just loves to talk about or hear about Gracie Jiu-Jitsu. We'll explore the lives of Gracie Jiu-Jitsu practitioners, how they got involved in the art, and what effect it's had on their lives. So buckle up and enjoy the ride. Welcome to episode 150 of the Gracie Jiu-Jitsu Rocks podcast. As always, I'm your host, Marty Josie, and thanks for listening. Today's episode is all about Professor Keith Owen and the impact that he's had and his legacy. We'll hear from a number of people who knew and loved Keith, including his family members, training partners and affiliates, and even Professor Pedro Sauer. So I didn't know Keith as well as some of the ones you'll hear from on the episode today, but I did know him enough to know that he was an exceptional and incredible person with a genuine love of jiu-jitsu and of people. Before I knew much about Keith at all, I came across some of his YouTube videos and I really enjoyed them, especially the philosophy with those. So I reached out to Keith and asked him to be on the show, and he graciously accepted. So we did a podcast interview with him. Later, he came back on the show 2 other times with Mark Cookrow and Greg Nelson and was part of a panel interview. The first time discussing staying on the mat long term, and the second one was about starting the year off well and staying on course throughout the year, and that's included setting and accomplishing goals, etc. Anyway, really enjoyed having him on the show. He also read my book, See You on the Mat, and gave some great feedback to me about that, and I really felt honored that he read that. I, in turn, read his book and did a full review of it on the website, GracieJujitsuRocks.com. I did later meet him in person and really enjoyed that, but most of our communication and relationship was, at a distance through text and calls and whatnot. I texted him right before he went to Brazil just to say, hope he's doing well, and he told me he was going to Brazil and how excited he was for that. So I can only hope that when it's my time to leave this earth, that I will have had half the impact that he's had, and that I was loved by half the amount of people he's loved by. So without further ado, let's hear from some of the people who knew and loved Keith. I've also decided to include some clips of Keith himself speaking on various subjects and intersperse those into the episode with the hopes that this will enhance this tribute to him. So let's start with one of those now.
I have always liked martial arts ever since I first saw it as a kid, and I wanted to take martial arts. I mean, I was excited about it. I knew that's what I wanted to do, but my parents were really poor, and we couldn't afford martial arts lessons at the time, and so I had to wait until I was about 16 years old before I could buy them myself. I never got picked on when I was a kid, but I saw plenty of people who got picked on and harassed and just bullied by other people, and it made me want to go, hey, I want to defend myself against people that, because there's bad people in the world. And, truthfully, all I want to do in life is be nice to other people. But if other people don't want to be nice to me, I'll kick their ass. Like, and it's a straight up kind of deal, because, you know, I just want to go through life being nice to people.
All right, first up is Ari K., first-degree black belt under Keith Owen, as well as many other things. And what I'm going to do with these bios for everyone is keep it really intentionally short, and I will put more information about each person who participated in this episode in the show notes, so you can find out more about them as well as contact them if you would like. So here's Ari.
There's a lot of stuff to say about Keith Owen, and I'm not going to go into the details of how I met him and all that stuff like that. I mean, it goes back many years, and essentially he reached out to me first, and I featured him on Submissions 101. But as we developed a relationship, I found that he's very approachable. He was very funny, and his methodology of teaching was the thing that really I loved. He showed that, you know, basics work. He had these little tricks that he picked up from Master Pedro Sauer, which he was able to translate really easily. He was just such a fantastic teacher, and I think that's what initially attracted me to his teaching style. And then over the years, we became best of friends, and he was always there for me, and he was a fantastic mentor. And the thing that I loved the most about him is he didn't give a shit about what people thought of him. And I literally right now have a picture in front of me of him sitting on my mats with his middle finger, giving the middle finger to the camera. And that kind of encapsulates his personality when, you know, he did his things his own way.
Tell us a little more about what it was like training with him.
Training was awesome. So for a big guy, he had fantastic technique. He never relied on his strength. He always used to say that he wanted his output when he rolled to be 1%. And at first I didn't understand what that meant, but he basically was trying to be as efficient as possible and really kind of follow the tenets of kind of Gracie Jiu-Jitsu and not panicking, not using his size and strength. Not to say that that isn't something that you should use. You should totally play to your strength and weaknesses, that type of thing. But he really was he had this finesse about him. And it was the little things, the little details, which he constantly would show students and show myself that really was a winner in my books.
Excellent. What would you say is the biggest or most important thing you learned from him?
That's a tough one, because I learned a ton of different things from Keith, both on and off the mat. I think that what you will get from people that you interview and anyone that has met him is not only was his jiu-jitsu phenomenal and he was a world-class teacher, but there was things off the mat he would teach or just do, which I think made it even more impactful. He would reach out to people that he had met once. He would send these little funny comments on social media to wish happy birthday. He would check in with people. He never blew anyone off. He treated everyone, respectfully and as an equal. So it wasn't like, hey, I'm a 4th degree black belt and I don't have time for a white belt. He always had time for people. And that's a huge win for me. And one of the reasons we became friends.
I totally agree with that. What a great trait that is, right? Mm-hmm. To always have time for others and to be humble enough when you're a giant in many ways, to be humble enough to teach people what you know and have time for them and connect with them.
Yeah, and we often would talk about, we knew that there's a finite time that we have on this planet. Obviously, we don't know when we're going to die, and he really was just, every day he would wake up and there's a group that we used to have with the Team Rhino affiliates, and every Monday he would post just a kind of a one-liner, and it would say Fast Start Mondays. And that was his way to just tell you it's Monday. A lot of people hate Mondays. He loved Mondays. And he was just like, get after it. So don't wait, because you just don't know how long you have. So that was really important.
Savor every day, right?
Yep, totally. And that's very cliche to say. Like I really try to live that philosophy, and even more so since the passing of him and many of my close friends recently. I really am trying to do that. So it's important.
Ari, if you had a chance to speak to him one more time, what do you think you'd say to him?
Oh, that's a fantastic question. I think I would ask him, and this kind of shadows what I asked my dad years ago before he passed. My dad passed about 10 years ago. But I think I would ask Keith, what would you like me to do after you're gone to help continue your legacies or things that I specifically could do? Because we don't have those anymore, right? We just have to speculate. And the funny thing is, you're going to ask a whole bunch of people what they thought of Keith and his personality, and we're all going to have different viewpoints and experiences with that. So I'm hoping that I'm trying to continue his legacy to help out Charlene and his boys, and anything I can do to kind of carry on. So I would say, hey, if you're gone, what do you need me to do? And I honestly, and I know he would have a smart ass comment in response to that. And he would say something like, you know what? You just need to continue jiu-jitsu. You just keep doing, all that stuff. But please make sure you can crush my enemies if you have a chance, or something like that.
That's great.
Yeah.
All right, next up is Rob McGow, third-degree Pedro Sauer black belt and owner of Bushido BJJ, which is 2 Pedro Sauer affiliate schools.
So Keith Owen, I met Keith Owen probably 2007, and it was funny. I was just going through YouTube. It had come out in 2006. I was watching some videos. I saw a video pop up about bjjmoves.com. I said, hey, I like this guy, the way he talks, the way he explains things. I sent an email, said, hey, I have a school in Connecticut. Do you do seminars? And within 10 minutes, my phone was ringing. It was, hey, I'm Keith Owen. I'm from Idaho. And I'm like, hey, how's it going, Keith? And from that point on, we hit it off because, he was prior law enforcement. I was law enforcement. We both had 3 boys. His oldest and my oldest named Alex same, and both Red Sox fans. And we just, from the moment I spoke to him on the phone, I felt like I knew Keith forever. And he had that effect on people. It just, he could meet you right now and you felt like you've known him for 10 years. And from that point forward, we were friends. I don't think there was a week that has gone by that I haven't spoken to Keith on the phone or in person or texting constantly since that moment. So probably I would say Keith was one of the most, if not the most influential person in my life when it came to martial arts. And that includes Master Sauer, because I spent a lot of time with Keith Owen and talking to him constantly. He was my advisor through the association. So, I miss Keith every day. There's so many times I've had questions that will pop in my head. I can't ask him anymore, He was a great man, great friend, and, what you see is what you get with Keith.
You're not the first to say that. I think he really had that. The people who knew him well definitely appreciate that about him. It says a lot that you put him up there with Master Sauer as far as, learning from and everything. What would you say, out of all the things you learned, what would you say are some of the most important things you learned from him?
One of the biggest things that I learned from Keith, because when I met Keith, I was a purple belt. And this is going back a ways, and he was a black belt. He had just gotten his black belt a few years before that. And when I met Keith, I guess my style of teaching at the time was very, I don't want to say abrasive, but it was like people came to the school and we had to prove to them that, hey, we're tougher than you, and we're going to beat you down, and and the strong will stay, and that kind of thing. And I remember him coming to me and he says, Rob, do you want to have the same 30 guys you've been training with your whole life? Or do you want to have 300? And do you want to impact lives and not just, basically bully people on the mat is what we were doing. And he changed my mind on training methodologies and that you can get a lot farther, helping people out and being a leader to them versus just an adversary on the mat. And I think that, my school grew tremendously after I met Keith Owen based upon, his philosophy of dealing with students.
Would you admire the most about him off the mat?
Honesty. He was probably one of the most honest people I ever met. Keith would look you right in the face and tell you exactly what he thought. And 99.999%, if not 100, he was right. I remember I was a brown belt, and I'd been a brown belt for a while, and out of the blue, he said, I hadn't brought up nothing in conversation. Out of the blue, he says, you're not ready to be a black belt because your mount sucks. I remember he said that. Your top game sucks. And I'm like, oh, wow, that's abrasive, And he's like, but it's the truth. And I'm not going to lie to you. You're my friend. I like you a lot. You need to get better at it. I spent the next, 18 months, really focusing on that. And, now I'm known for that. Like if you talk to my present students, that's what I'm known for. That's because Keith, was an honest guy. He told you he was a straight shooter. He told you what he thought. And like I said, almost overwhelmingly, he was correct.
In a world full of yes men or yes women, that's a rare and unique quality where somebody that will shoot that straight and it's all for your good.
Oh yeah, 100%.
Yeah. So Rob, if you had one last chance to talk to Keith again, what would you say to him?
Thank you. I would say thank you because, like I said, I was doing this before I met Keith. But I do this a lot better because of Keith. And, I think that I was at a fork in the road when I met Keith, and there's a saying in the martial arts that when a student needs a teacher appears. When a teacher needs a student appears. And I think that we kind of met each other at that right moment when he was trying to branch out, not away from the association, but kind of on his own kind of thing. And I needed some guidance because my instructor that I had at the time had gone off to the UFC and wasn't around anymore. And I needed a leader, basically. And I remember asking him, hey, would you, can I join, you? And he says, I remember he said this, and I'll leave you with this. He says, you don't want me, you want my professor. And then he introduced me to Peter Sauer.
And now we'll hear from Kerrigan Owen, one of Keith's sons.
Well, thanks so much for having me on and giving just a few minutes to share so much about my father. And I know all the people who are going to share so many wonderful, wonderful things about my dad. The biggest thing that when I think about my dad over, almost 27 years of being around him and, so many people, as I'm sure on this podcast, will talk so much about jiu-jitsu and talk so much about just the legacy of Professor Owen through his many years in martial arts. For me and even my brothers, we all grew up on the mat with my dad, and we were on the mat from just such a young age, and my dad just really excited to share that passion with us for jiu-jitsu, and we all shared that passion throughout the years. I got my blue belt in jiu-jitsu when I was 16 years old, and I just remember growing up on the mat with my dad and traveling to different parts of the country and getting to have him as my coach on the mats, and even recently starting jiu-jitsu with at Team Rhino in our new facility, and just being mind blown on, man, wow, I can't believe just how much knowledge my dad had, and it was just pretty amazing to go through that. But for me, when I think about my dad, a lot of people say never to meet your hero because they're always going to let you down. But for me, I think about my dad and really in all the ways besides jiu-jitsu. I think about how great of a teacher he was. But for me, being 26 years old and now being married for 5 years now to my wife, Madeline, and now having my first son, I think about my dad as the father he was. I think of him as the husband he was. It's just so amazing. I shared this at his funeral, but the number one thing I think about my dad was the fact that he really was the greatest example of a husband that I've ever seen. And I don't just say that as he loved my mom, but I say that of all the many things that I saw growing up of my dad, traveling all over the world throughout pretty much my whole life. He was traveling, but still making the time to be a father and still going above and beyond to be a husband. Like I mentioned, I've been married for 5 years now, and while 5 years is no long amount of time to be married, I really see so many different things that I am now as a husband, and I feel like hopefully a good one. I just see the example of my father. He really was the marker of being a good man on and off the mat. And now him passing away and hearing so many stories of people, interacting with him off the mat and just getting a glimpse of who he was as a man. You know, one thing that I've really admired about my dad is that he always preached that jiu-jitsu should make you a better man. Not necessarily should make you more technical, should make you a better in the guard or better in the streets. And those are all true. But the things that he always talked about was who jiu-jitsu makes you be. And I think he was the best example of that. Jiu-jitsu should hopefully make you a better man. Jiu-jitsu should make you more kind. Jiu-jitsu should make you more peaceful. Jiu-jitsu should make you all of these things. And he really exemplified all of those things. And so for me now, looking post my dad passing away, it's been a handful of months now, I just really want people to remember him as the person he was, not just the jiu-jitsu practitioner he was. And I think all can attest on how amazing he was at jiu-jitsu, and just being one of what I believe to be, and I think many would believe to be, as one of the greatest teachers of jiu-jitsu that the art has ever seen. And I really believe that. But I want people to go on in the jiu-jitsu career with the mentality of, man, this is going to make me a better person. And hopefully as people get their black belt one day, they go, man, I am a completely different man. I'm a completely different woman than I was before. And I think that would make my dad really happy. So, you know, for me, as I wrap up, I think I'm so proud to be his son. I know for all the brothers, as my mom and I have really taken the ranks of Team Rhino, and as I've really dove into all the things Team Rhino and jiu-jitsu and all the things, even started jiu-jitsu again myself, I just am so mind blown by what my dad has created. So proud to be his son, and so proud to be, a father now. He unfortunately, as many know, he didn't get a chance to meet my son, which was, definitely heartbreaking. Excuse me. Excuse me. Sorry.
No
yeah, definitely a heartbreaking thing. But every day, my dad is my screensaver on my phone, and as I hold my son and I talk to him, and I just get to share all the wonderful things about my dad, and I just get to be the father that he was, and every day I just say, man, I'm so grateful I get to be the father that he was. I get to share about all the memories of my dad, and I get to share all the lessons and all the things that he taught us to my son Brooks. Now he's 3 months old. He's starting to look at me and starting to make eye contact with me, and I just get to be the dad he was. And every day I just think about my mom, and I think about my wife, and I get to be the husband he was. And so I'm so proud to be his son, and so proud to now, step on the mats and hopefully one day maybe be the jiu-jitsu, half of the jiu-jitsu practitioner he was. So, wow. So many amazing memories, and he really just want people to know, man, as so many people were his, he was their hero. And I just want them to know, if they never got the chance to meet him, that he was everything that they thought he was. So that's the legacy I think he left behind for sure.
Wow. He was a hero, and what an incredible impact he had on your life and so many people's lives. And how great it was that you had that role model to teach you and inspire you. And it's certainly playing out with your family now. If you had one thing you could tell him now, what would it be?
The one thing that I would tell my dad, if I see him again, which I know that I will see him again one day, the one thing I would tell him, let's see, I would probably just tell him again, just how amazing of a father he was, and that everything that I am, I look at the success of all of his sons, just how proud I am to be his son. And I know that he knew that, but I don't think I told him enough, especially as much as I would have liked. probably the biggest lesson that I learned from him is just never take yourself too seriously. And if anyone was on the mat with him, if any was around him, he was always telling jokes. He was always making light of the situations. And for me, as I was really, really appreciated about them. He always just saw a good time, and he always wanted to make other people feel connected. I remember growing up, he would always use his words to tell us how much he loved us. He'd always use his words. And if anyone has gotten a message from him on Facebook or in person, is you always knew where you stood with him. You always got a message from him. And for me, I would just tell him, man, I just appreciate every word, every moment that I spent with my dad. So.
All right. It's a good time to hear a few more words from Keith.
Well, I really think that's what's lacking in jiu-jitsu, because I see everybody doing jiu-jitsu moves, but I don't see a lot of people talking about the philosophy of jiu-jitsu and about the thought process behind it. And Professor Sauer has been really instrumental in making me think about jiu-jitsu, and he gives those philosophical viewpoints along with teaching the jiu-jitsu. He'll be doing moves, and then all of a sudden he'll sit there for 10 minutes talking about some philosophical idea of jiu-jitsu that makes you understand the concepts of how to do jiu-jitsu better. And I really feel that that's lacking today in jiu-jitsu. People are real good at doing moves and doing the physical thing, but the mental aspect of it is, I think, is lacking. And that's what I want to give to students, because I think it's very important. And if I'm going to have a positive effect on jiu-jitsu, I think it's really through the philosophy. And to some extent to the technique as well. I mean, I try to have awesome technique, but I really want, if I could say something about blue belts not quitting, which I recently did a video on that about why blue belts quit. If I could keep blue belts from not quitting, even one guy who went, man, I heard that, and just because of what you said, I decided not to quit, then I have done my job. And that's what I'm looking for, is I'm really addicted to jiu-jitsu, and I really want to see it grow, because there's a lot of crappy martial arts out there, and you might disagree with that, but there are a ton of crappy martial arts, and jiu-jitsu is, especially Gracie jiu-jitsu, is a very effective form of self-defense, and my job is to spread it to the entire world. And if I can keep one guy who maybe goes on and gets his black belt, he'll help 20, 30, 50, 100, 2,000 more people from that one video. And so that's what I'm trying to accomplish.
All right. Next up is Joshua Arentz, second degree Keith Owen black belt, and an instructor at Team Rhino headquarters.
I met Keith in 2010. I moved from Portland, Oregon over to Boise. I was looking for a jiu-jitsu gym. I had seen a lot of the websites of other gyms and kind of taken a look around, and I went in to watch Team Rhino. It was Ultimate Jiu-Jitsu at the time, and I just really liked kind of the way the gym felt in terms of the, call it vibe, or the personality of the gym. And I was just sitting there watching, and Keith came over and talked to me, and it was a pretty good conversation, and that was kind of into that. He became my coach when I was a purple belt. And from a professor standpoint, I think he was just really good at driving you to be better. When you weren't rolling at your potential, if you will, he would call you out, might be strong, but basically he'd call you out. What's going on here? This, maybe not those exact words, but as a student, you could definitely tell, okay, I got to step up my game, right? I mean, everyone gets a little lazy every once in a while, but he had a tendency to see that very clearly. And then, when your techniques were good but not great, he always made them more towards great, right? You still have to be able to perform, but he would always tweak your techniques in order to make them better and more effective, less energy. And I think just what he means to me, he's just a great jiu-jitsu mentor. He's a good friend. He cared a lot about the culture of the gym, which is something we're trying to carry on now as well. Wanted the right people, the right mentality. Didn't want any douchebags in the gym, wanted people that supported each other and lifted each other up. I think as a gym owner and a jiu-jitsu professor and an instructor, he was top notch.
I'm sure there were a lot, but what was one of the biggest lessons that stand out to you that you learned from him?
I think one of the things that everybody could see from Keith is how much he loved his wife and how much he loved his family and how much he respected his professor, Professor Sauer, or Master Sauer, I should say. He couldn't talk enough about his wife, Shalane, his boys, or Professor Sauer. His loyalty was so important to him that he kind of drove that into everybody. And I think that was really important because, you have this, Keith was not a small man, right? He was a large man. He had a lot of skills but when it came to his wife and his family, he could get very emotional, which is really good to see. I think vulnerability is a really good thing for professors and, people that would, if you considered someone like Keith a hard man in terms of, all of his skills and his expertise, but then to also be able to see that, things that he was very loyal to and that he cared a lot about, in terms of his wife and his family. And then with Professor Sauer, I think it was hard to go to a class without him talking about Professor Sauer and his respect and loyalty for his professor. And I think that shows in everything that he did across any of his seminars or his classes or anything you see online. I mean, he was really loyal to Professor Sauer. So I think loyalty and love of family and respect for his professor are probably some of the key things that he drove outside of the gym and the local ecosystem of Team Rhino, if you will.
Very nice. Josh, if you had one final opportunity to speak with him again, what would you say to him?
Give me a second. I think, when you look back, I think I wished he would have known how much I respected him and how much, I appreciated everything he did in the gym. And, maybe my loyalty towards him. Sorry, that's a tough question.
I understand.
Yeah, I still today think, I wished he would have known more how I felt. They say, you don't want to regret, when someone passes and you want them to know everything. Those are the things I wish Keith would have known more from me.
Well, that's powerful. And I think we can all certainly learn from that. And for anybody that is currently special in our lives, to make sure they really know it. So, and I'm sure he did know it, but we always probably wish we could have told people even more, but I'm sure he knew it.
I appreciate you reaching out. It's anything that we can do to, keep the things that Keith wanted to do alive, between the gym and Team Rhino and, respect towards Professor Sauer, supporting his family, all of those things. That's what we're doing.
All right, next let's hear from Carlton Rowe, who's a third stripe brown belt and Team Rhino affiliate at Crow's Nest BJJ.
So I was lucky. I met Keith back in 2014 when I joined the association. That's kind of how our relationship started. He'd actually put on Facebook that he was starting his own jiu-jitsu association. He was challenged by his professor, by his instructor, Master Sauer, to kind of step out and help grow jiu-jitsu, if you will. and was challenged by him to start his own association. So he put on Facebook, hey, this is what I'm doing. If you're interested, yada, 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 get a hold of me. So I contacted him because I had been a big fan of his videos for many years. So I thought, you know what? I'm just a tiny little school owner. I'm going to give it a shot. And I reached out to him, and that's kind of how our whole relationship started. And not to mix words or to jump too far into it, but he meant the world to me. He was the mentor in jiu-jitsu as much as in life that I had so desperately needed. I was real lucky to have been able to spend the time that I was able to spend with him. Not only from a business aspect and from a coach aspect, there were so many things that I was able to learn and take and absorb from him, whether he knew that he was doing it on purpose, which I kind of think that he did. When he came to my school, when he came to my academy, I'm up in Michigan. So when he would travel all the way up to do a seminar, spend the weekend with us, he would stay at my house. A lot of traveling jiu-jitsu seminar, what's the word I'm looking for? A lot of the guys that do that and make the living that way, they live out of a hotel, they live out of their suitcase, and every time he would come up, and I would always make him the offer, but he would always, hey, if it's okay with you, I'd rather stay with you guys, have a home cooked meal and be able to sit around and drink a beer and just talk about the problems of the world, if you will. And we would get into some of the most interesting and fascinating conversations. And I didn't understand how fascinating and interesting they were, usually until Sunday when I would take him to the airport and drop him off. He would draw me in to such unbelievable conversations that I had zero interest in or zero belief in. And then by the end of it, I would end up believing in Bigfoot or whatever it happened to be, because he would plead his case. And by the end of it, I'm like, you know what? I think Bigfoot is real. And anybody that knows Professor Owen at any level, they're going to understand that particular example and that particular story, because he was a big believer in the myth of Bigfoot. And we got into a long, long conversation. And by the end of it, I was like, it was to the point where weeks later, I'm trying to convince other people that Bigfoot is real. And I think back on that one conversation, and I think, oh my Lord, like he did it. He totally pulled me in and got me. But that was just the person that he was. He would talk to anybody about anything, and truly, he would engage with you. There was give and take. He would listen and he would respond, and he would think through his responses thoughtfully. He didn't just wait for his turn to talk. He was a true mentor and a true friend, and I literally could go on talking about him for days.
I'm sure. What an amazing person, and how great for you that you had him as a mentor and got to spend that time absorbing all that.
Absolutely.
Let me ask you, I'm asking everybody this, and it's probably a difficult question, but if you had one more opportunity or chance to speak with him, what would you say to him?
So I would probably, so I was there. I don't know if you knew this or not, but I was there when he passed in Brazil. I was lucky enough to be at Pedro Sauer's summer camp with him. And I would like to tell him that it's going to be okay. We're going to get his wife, Charlene. We're going to get the boys. We're going to get everybody through it. And I would like to, there's so many one last things that I would like to say, but for him to truly understand the impact that he's made on jiu-jitsu and the people that have trained with him consistently, I think that's what I would try to drive home to him. I would try to let him know that his life's work wasn't in vain, that it was actually purposeful, and that he was making a difference.
Okay, next up is Todd Richards, who's a second-degree black belt under Keith Owen and James Foster, and an instructor at Team Rhino HQ.
Probably want to start with kind of what I admired the most about him is just the way he treated every individual person that came into the room as their each own individual person, and he was there to interact with them on that special individual level, right? He didn't just say, "Oh, hey, how you doing?" He took the time to go out to each individual person and have that short conversation with them when they'd come into the room, and really got to know you and really got involved with them. So, he made you feel like you were the only person that he was worried about at the time. There could be 50 other people in the room. There could be another famous black belt in the room, and he'd take that time to talk to you and make you feel like you were the only person that really mattered at the time. And that was just, interacting with a guy like that who is famous in the jiu-jitsu community was great, because regardless of how many times you talked to him, every time you talked to him, you felt like you were that was the most important conversation you were having with him. And it really came across when he spoke with you that he'd remember things that you talked about previously and just make you feel great about yourself, and that he valued your time with him as much as you value your own time. So
what an amazing trait, right?
Yeah.
What would you say is one of the most important things that stands out in your mind about what you learned from him? It could be jiu-jitsu related or just life related.
Learning one of the most important things for me is I really learned how to teach from him. Being that I started teaching most of the time I've taught with as an instructor is with him, is how to teach and how to instruct people, as opposed to just, yes, I know how to explain it, but actually how to teach and how to explain things to different people in different ways, and how to really kind of captivate and being able to thoroughly explain things and thoroughly teach people and hold the attention of people as you're teaching. I think he did a really good job of showing me how to do that. So
super important. And I think that that starts with really listening, how you described earlier, how he really was, intentional and present and listened.
Mm-hmm.
Let me ask you, if you had one last chance to talk to him, what would you say to him?
Oh, man. Just tell him that I loved him, and he would have been a great friend to me.
Yeah. Well, everybody that came in contact with him and had their paths cross were certainly lucky, and he had major impact. Anything else you want to share about your time with him, your relationship, or anything?
Just that I'm forever grateful for the time I got to spend with him.
Yes.
I'm just grateful for that time I got with him.
Yes.
Oh, man.
Totally fine, man. I know this is hard, and I know it's it's a hard thing to lose someone you love, or have had such an impact in your life and was so important to you. So totally understand.
Thank you.
And now a little more from Keith.
And 2 years later, I worked there 2 years later, and it really made me a better person. And now when I came back into the martial arts and with doing jiu-jitsu and all of that, it makes me, I think, be a more humble person, a more nicer person. And it makes me realize that I work for my students. My students do not work for me. I am there to serve them. They are not here to serve me. And you've heard of a lot of different martial arts guys who might have gotten into trouble by, I don't know, sleeping with students, or treating students bad, or having favorites in class, and I have none of that in my school. I treat everybody equally, and some people might disagree, but I'm really trying my best. And I think that's the thing that I want to share with everybody, is that, man, there are so many instructors that just they think that it's all about them, and it's really not. It's all about the students. We got to get that white belt to black belt. He needs the help, or she needs the help. And we We are their servants. They are not our servants. And I think black belts in jiu-jitsu need to realize that. And then they'll have success. Because people want to help you. You need to set these guys up for success, because if their self-esteem starts to go, wow, I don't think I can do this, I'm not very good at this, there's just another reason why they are out the door. And I think it behooves us to set them up for success, like we were talking about, and get them to a place where they can not just get killed, but start out easily. Let's take, for instance, my school. I try not to have new students grapple. And I know that I'm talking heresy to some people. Well, what do you mean, new students grapple? At most schools, they come in, they learn how to stand up in base, or they learn one move, and like I said, thrown to the wolves. And we can't have that. I mean, that paradigm is done. We need to be able, I don't care where you start, I care where you finish, and I want you as a black belt. But to start out, we got to start out slow. And I got to tell you, I think the worst guy that there is the dude who had glory days. He was a wrestler, or he was doing something. He's middle-aged now, but in his mind, he still thinks he's 21. He comes in there, oh yeah, I want to grapple. I hear that, I want to grapple, I'm ready. And we go, are you sure that you want to grapple starting out, man? Just take your time. No, I'm ready to grapple. He goes and grapples, gets killed, and then I don't see the dude again, right? Because, again, Greg said it, in the morning, you're like, you can't feel your arms, you feel like you're in a coma, or you're paralyzed, and you go, wow, I'm too old, this isn't for me. We got to start off slow.
All right, next up is James Foster, 4th degree Kiva Santana black belt, and 3 times black belt master world champion.
Well, I met Keith via online about 2007 or 2008. Around that time, I was running a blog where I would actually review jiu-jitsu equipment and DVDs, instructional DVDs, and that type of thing. So, that was still back in the days where the instructional DVDs were not that prevalent, and Keith was among that kind of first group of people who was actually putting out consistent content, regular content as far as jiu-jitsu instruction. And Keith reached out to me online and asked if I would review one of his DVDs, and mailed it to me, and that's where the relationship started. And we just hit it off right away. He was a very genuine person, and very much you could get a sense of how much he cared right out the gate, not only about the level of his instruction that he was putting out, but also, the impact and I should say the positive impact he was having on others, and the types of, people he wanted to associate himself within the jiu-jitsu world. And from there, we ended up, because we have the mutual connection with Ari, we ended up starting a little seminar tour. We called it Black Belt Chain Reaction, which was me and Keith and Pete Wilhelm and the character that is known as Classy Grappler, as well as another character within the jiu-jitsu community named Hanato Laranja. And so we went up to Victoria and taught a seminar together, and that was kind of one of the first of many times that we got to spend with one another and teach seminars and interact. And, at that point, I believe I had already attended some Keith Owen seminars and was just blown away by his level of detail and just the overall presentation of how he taught seminars. It's something that I still try to strive to attain, that level of quality and production that goes into the seminars, because nobody wanted to follow Keith if Keith was teaching on the same event. I remember at Black Belts for Butterflies in Connecticut, which is a autism benefit charity seminar, Keith was known as the closer. Nobody wanted to follow Keith Owen. Yeah, it was just too tough of an act to follow.
Absolutely.
And so he raised the bar very high, and I remember here recently when we did the Black Belts for Butterflies in Connecticut, after Keith's passing, I got to be the closer at that one, and I definitely had him in my heart and in my mind. Anytime I teach, I'm thinking about, just attaining that level. It was not only the instruction, but the analogies he would use, the humor that he would include, all of these different things just set his seminars above, in my experience, everyone else that I had the honor of attending. And as far as Keith and my personal relationship, I think anybody close with Keith, we had that kind of poking and prodding and joking and just a lot of humor, a lot of fun. One of my favorite times of getting to spend a lot of time with Keith was when he came out here to Washington State, and he ended up coming over and staying at my house. And we live on a green belt, some little bit of woods and everything here. And Keith, as many people may or may not know, was an avid believer in Bigfoot. So Keith and I spent probably about 2 hours going through thick trees and sticker bushes and things out in my green belt looking for Bigfoot and seeing things that we were just convinced that he was for sure was convinced that was the only thing that could have caused that was Bigfoot.
That's great.
And I remember getting back in the house all scraped up and dirty, and my wife just looking at us both like we were crazy. What are you guys doing out there for so long? And we were telling her the things that we found, little spots that looked like they could have been nesting areas, or a section of fence that was bent like something grabbed it. And yeah, that was
nice. Nice.
That's a memory I'll carry with me forever. And on that topic, Ari is a huge believer in UFOs. Keith was always a huge believer in Bigfoot. So it was always funny when you're around those guys,
right,
to listen to them argue about why, Keith didn't think UFOs were real and Ari didn't think Bigfoot was real. both heavily believing in things that are very hard to believe for most people,
sure,
but telling the other one why they were crazy for thinking their thing was the plausible thing that actually existed.
Love it. Hey James,
yes,
if you had one more opportunity to speak with him, what would you say to him?
Well, I'll tell you this. Keith and I never... I've said everything to Keith that I ever wanted to say. So one thing I pride myself on, and I know that he did, was in our interactions with other people, we never left it a mystery as to how we felt about one another. So Keith and I, it was very clear the level, with which we cared about each other. So our last conversation, I'm sure that we made that very clear. So I'm blessed in the sense that even though I'm devastated that he's gone and it was so unexpected, I'm at peace with knowing that each other, we always made it clear. We always took the time to reach out and to tell each other, how special the other was. And for me, Keith always reached out, and I know several other people have stories like this where he would just reach out of the blue and, tell you, James, you're a good man, or James, I really look up to you. You're a good person. And he would just randomly do that, just out of the blue. And I would try to make sure that I was doing the same things with others I interacted with. Keith's last
Facebook post on my Facebook wall in typical Keith humor fashion was, "Hey James, your dad thinks I'm cool," because my dad and him would interact and message with each other on Facebook, and I commented, I said, "Well, he's not wrong." So
love it.
that was actually our last interaction before he passed. Yeah, so just a beautiful person, genuine, always treated others with respect. They say you have to earn respect, but Keith always, I think, lived by that mentality of I'm going to treat somebody with respect until they give me a reason not to, that type of thing. So he was always very caring, very genuine, and just, the world truly lost a special person.
And now we'll hear from Keith's son, Alex Owen.
So I want to talk about my dad as a father. Everyone knows him as, Professor Keith Owen, which is an amazing thing. Dad as a father, he really set this precedence of family values and ties. And so growing up with him, we always looked up to him. He was in law enforcement. We've been a part of the studio our whole life. So there's that factor of my dad. But my dad as a father, it was a really special thing. He's got a really long life story on along the way. And so his parenting style was, I don't know if it was unique or different comparatively, but for us boys, he really taught us a high moral drive and a lot of integrity. And what he did was he never held our hand through life, but he never judged us. Every moment, every day, month after year, it was be the best human being you can, and I don't care what you do with your life. And that's a really amazing thing, because my dad didn't have this pressure on us to be these great worldly men. He started off going, first, be a good man to everyone around you, and as long as you're a good man, that's all I care about as a father. And so it really let us boys really explore who we are and what we want to do for a living. We did not follow my dad in the jiu-jitsu route in the way of running the studio, taking over the business, but that's okay. And he was always okay with that, because at the end of the day, he goes, be the best man you can possibly be and do exactly what you want with your life.
Wow. Can't ask for better than that, right?
No, it's absolutely, like I said, and there was never any judgment. He sure, us boys screwed up and he was disappointed, but he truthfully just wanted us to be exactly who we wanted to be.
Wow. I love hearing that, because there's so many times the opposite's true, and undue pressures put on people to be a certain way or turn out to do something.
Right. And it's a funny thing he always said, he goes, Alex, I don't care if you work at McDonald's, but you be the very best employee at McDonald's and have your moral values. And that was amazing, because then, when you're surrounded by that, environment, you're not scared to take risks and follow your dreams.
Excellent. If I ask you, Alex, and I'm asking everybody this, if I ask you, if you had one last chance to talk to him again, what would you say to him?
Oh, golly, it's going to make me emotional. Thanking him, for being the best dad for us three boys, and the best husband to my mom. So, I couldn't fathom what to truly, say over and over again, but I would just hug him and I would thank him, and I would thank him for all the life lessons. And, he built a really strong family, and, we can overcome anything.
Absolutely. Any last words you want to share about him?
It was very overwhelming, when he did pass, because, you understand the reach he had on a lot of people, and how many people were involved in his life and involved in their life. And so when we had the ceremony and going through that, it was an absolute amazing experience. There was thousands of people involved, and I want to thank every human being that has supported my family and my father through this. We can't do it without you. We're continuing the business, and it takes a village, and everyone has 100% been there for us as a family, and words cannot describe, how amazing that is for us in this really hard times.
And up next is Jeff Walther, brown belt and instructor at Iron Lion Jiu-Jitsu Academy.
I mean, I think, what drew us together as friends, and we were fast friends, was just that he was a real dude. There was no bullshit with Keith. And I depended on that as his friend. Like, I could call him anytime and he would be like straight with me. He didn't really care about your feelings so much. He would just tell you how it was. And he was a great business guy, and I saw him, grow that business from the beginning, before he had moved to Meridian. And we were friends, and that was like, I could tell it was a real friendship because he didn't really get anything out of me. It wasn't like I was part of his association or that we even trained under the same, lineage. But there was never a time that he didn't include me. He would invite fighters to his house to stay for tournaments and stuff, and I was always part of that. Every seminar I would stay at his house, and we would just hang out. And when he would come up here, he'd come stay at our house or visit at least. And it was just, he was always real and genuine, and I could count on him to tell me when I was off track or tell me when I was right. But he never sugarcoated it, and that's what I appreciated the most, I think.
That's a pretty refreshing trait, isn't it?
It is, and we call it like he was a loyal no person. He didn't let the friendship cloud the judgment. So if I was off track, he was quick to put me back on track. And so, yeah, that was, I think we talked at a minimum probably twice a month. And then anytime we got an opportunity to train together or teach together, that was another thing he taught me was how to teach people, which was invaluable. I mean, that's what made my career. It's why I can go in the police world. I can step into any world board and knock it out of the park because I know how to present. And that I learned that from Keith. And he was a huge mentor from that point on. And like I said, we became fast friends, and I think we were just like-minded. And it was just awesome. He wasn't here a long time, but he had a remarkable impact while he was here.
Yes. And that's the important thing, right?
Oh, yeah. Yeah, and it's funny, my kids, especially my oldest son, he was, for his first 3 Halloweens, he was Professor Keith Owen, and he'd put the gi on. And
I love it.
And he would go around trick-or-treating, and so even he had a special relationship with Keith, and, Keith was always asking about him and sending him T-shirts, and, when he wrote his book, he sent us a copy of that and signed it for my boy, and he just turned 13, and he still, still watches all the videos of Keith like he did when he was, little kid. We have videos of him watching, the favorite moves, volume 1 and 2 and 3, as he was, 2 and 3 years old.
That's so great, man.
Kept his time, and so it's cool. It's he was just a cool guy, and I miss him dearly.
What was it like training with him?
It was fun. So he's a big shit talker. So he would talk smack the whole time, and but he would teach you, right? He never, and that's the sign of a good teacher. If he tapped you out, you could ask him, well, where did it go wrong? And he could pinpoint and then fix whatever issue you had, so that you didn't do it again. And so I would use that as I would go around to different schools. I could tell who knew how to teach and who didn't by if you got tapped out, you'd be like, hey man, where'd it go wrong? And they'd be like, oh no, you're fine. Well, that guy's not a good teacher. And Keith was just really, really into the teaching part of it. And he was hard on, like I said, I went through all the police instructor schools for defensive tactics that he taught back in the day. And he would never let you get away with it. He would be sure to tell you, like, as an instructor, think of it as a performance. Like, you're responsible for keeping these people's attention. You can't just get up there and so he would perform, and he was a great teacher. There is one story that comes to mind. I think it was 2011, and one of the guys in Meridian who had a small school asked Keith to co-host a Huron Gracie seminar. And so we all fly down, and we're staying with Keith, and it's me and Ari, and this dude named Mike Vannon from Canada, and we're all in the house, and we're talking shit all weekend. And first time we're meeting Huron, he's like a great dude. But the next day we have to travel to somewhere in central Idaho, maybe Twin Falls. And we had been tasked to rent a van and take Huron with us on this road trip. So it's like 3 a.m, and we roll up to Huron's hotel, and Keith stops in the street like before we enter the parking lot and slams it into park in dramatic fashion and turns around and looks at all of us, and we're like, oh geez, it's, you know, one of Keith's speeches that he's so famous for. And he looks at all of us, and he's pretty serious, and he's like, look it, this is a Gracie family member getting in this van. That being said, if catch any of you kissing his ass this weekend, you're walking home. You treat him like a regular dude. I don't care. If I catch you kissing his ass, you walk home. And so we all kind of laugh, and I don't know, like, you know, I'm just a regular dude. And so I don't know if Keith knew what he was asking for, because we all love to talk shit, and Huron's not going to remember me. He's going to remember Keith Owen. He's not going to remember some dude in a van. So poor Huron gets in, and like we're talking mad shit to him, and it's a lot of fun. And it takes him about an hour, I would say, before he finally cues in on, you know, what's happening. And not that he didn't know, but I think he was just like probably not used to people talking to him like regular people. You know, coming from that family, I'm sure he's surrounded by people that want to talk about jiu-jitsu all the time or want to talk about, you know, his family, and we're just talking shit to him. And finally, about an hour after the van ride started, he just starts laughing randomly and just like shakes his head. He's like, you Pedro Sauer guys have lots of jokes. And then he just started opening up, and it was one of the greatest road trips I think I've ever been on. Super fun, and like real bonds were made, and it was a blast. But Keith did not care who you were. He was like, you will treat him like every other dude. Like, all right, dude, that's what you're asking for, that's what he's gonna get.
Nice.
But it's pretty funny.
Love it, man. The one thing I'm asking everybody, Jeff, is if you had one more opportunity to speak with him, what would you tell him, or what would you say to him?
Oh man, dude, that's a tough one. I was pretty open with him about, you know, our friendship. He knew how I felt, so I don't have any regrets in that. I was pretty clear, and as was he. So I don't know. I think I would just tell him he's a good dude, and you know, I feel for his family. Like, I'm really attentive to reaching out to them on a regular basis and making sure they have everything that they need. Because I've lost other friends just in my industry, and it's the families that are left behind that. And so I would probably just ask him how I could help them.
And here's a little more from Keith.
You know, when I was a blue belt to purple belt back in 1994, 95, a long time ago, I think it was 1894. There was a time, because I'm a big dude, and there was a time where my ego got so in the road. And what would happen was I would immediately, when we slapped hands, I would immediately try to push a guy over and make him get me in the guard, because I was so worried about winning that I didn't care about anything else. So I ended up in somebody's guard most of the time, and then I would pass the side control, and then I was in side control. I would do very limited things because I didn't want to get it reversed on me, and then I had to be in the bottom. And I kept telling myself, hey, I'll work on the bottom later. I gotta win. And so what would I win with? I'd win with Americana all the time, and I'd win with Kimura, and just something that was easy because that arm is on the other side of me, and I don't have to give any space. And one day, Master Pedro Sauer, he looked at me and he said, Keith, why don't you play the bottom game? And I was like, okay. And I decided right then and there that I was going to be on the bottom because I knew my bottom game sucked. And I got almost all the way to purple belt before I had made that decision. My point of it is if you'll start and get your ego out of the way, and so you're winning and stuff, that's cool, but work on your bottom game too, because Master Sauer says that the school is like a laboratory where you work on everything. And eventually you're going to have to get to a point where you're going to need to work on your escapes, how to get out of armbar, how to get out of triangle, where at my level, I literally put myself in a triangle so I can escape. But if you're always trying to do the same old tired, crappy moves that you do just so that you can win, you're going to be half a jiu-jitsu person, and it's going to take you longer. So get your ego out of the road and go, hey, I'll be on the bottom.
Next up is Mark Cookrow, second-degree Pedro Sauer black belt and owner of Integrated Martial Arts Academy.
So the way I got introduced to Keith Owen was through the association and Master Pedro, and I'd always seen his name on the list and heard through conversations that he was one of the people, one of the lead people and the figureheads and a prominent person. And so I always had some interest in meeting him and learning from him. And one day I bought a DVD of his, and I thought to myself, wow, this guy, he's a great teacher. And I sent him a message, and he replied. And I thought to myself, well, okay, that doesn't happen very often. And soon after that, he called me and he said, hey, Mark, this is Keith Owen. I just wanted to call you personally and answer your question. And I had a question. I don't even know what the question was about, but I remember being impressed with him reaching out to me and being so approachable and available. And we started a conversation, and that was at least 15 years ago. And we've been friends ever since. And I didn't meet him in person until maybe 2 years after that. He and I would talk, and he's one of the few people that I know in my life that I talk to on a regular basis for well over a decade, especially in the past 7 or 8 years. I'd say we would speak once a week at minimum, even if it was for 5 minutes, just to check in, get a pulse on how everyone's life is going, how everyone is doing, how Master Pedro is doing, the association. And there's just not many people that are like that. So I've always been impressed with him. And as a person, what really impressed me was that he was approachable. He was as real as it gets. He was honest. He would tell you what he thinks, whether you like it or not, in his own way. And he had a great, unique way of making you laugh and getting a lesson out of the conversation as well, too. And he may have considered me a peer, I don't know, but I always considered him to some degree a mentor of mine and someone that I could always talk to. And there was never any judgment, or he didn't try to get involved in business that wasn't his, but he would give you his perspective. He would listen, and he was skilled at the art of questioning to make you think about things in a different way. And so I've always appreciated that about him. From a jiu-jitsu perspective, I don't think I've ever met anyone that was more loyal or a stronger advocate or proponent of Master Pedro. And he absolutely just really held Master Pedro in high regard and told everyone Master Pedro was the greatest jiu-jitsu instructor on the planet, the greatest person you'll ever meet. And he was as loyal as you could ever be. And it was never in question at all whatsoever. And again, with even Master Pedro, he had the ability to speak his mind freely, tell him what he thought about things, agree, disagree, somewhere in the middle of everything. But he really just had a unique personality and a delivery of being able to agree to disagree, or just tell you the truth, give you tough love, give you support when you need it. And I think a lot more people need that in their friends in the world, because he wasn't just a teammate or a person that you could talk to, but if you were in his circle of influence, he genuinely considered you like part of his family and someone that he would really go out of his way for without even being asked. And that's really one of the things I appreciated too. As I remember when I started taking over more responsibilities and a bigger role with the organization, the association, and Keith was so excited. He called me up and he said, hey, I'm just so excited that we have, you doing what you're doing and helping with the association. And he said, I'm flying out to see you, me and Charlene, and you're not doing anything for me. You don't even have to say thanks. You're not paying for my tickets. I'm getting a hotel. We can go to lunch if you want, but I'm coming out and I'm going to teach at your school for 1 or 2 days, as much as you like, just because I appreciate what you're doing. And, you know, as at least me being raised, when your parents tell you to never show up at someone's home empty-handed, or just all these little things, I think manners and etiquette and gestures of kindness, they're few and far between. And I don't know a single person in the world that would fly from Boise, Idaho to Charlotte, North Carolina to just show up on his own, pay for his own flight, bring his wife, and spend a couple days with us just to say thank you. And let me tell you, my students loved him. To them, it was like meeting a rock star. And he just had this wonderful way about him. And he is missed. I spoke with him hours before his trip to Brazil, before his final trip to Brazil. And it's still, you know, I still hear his voice. I still think of the conversations that we had, and I take away a lot of the phrases and the isms and the advice that he gave to heart. And he always spoke from his heart, and he was as true as you could ever want a friend, mentor, or a leader to be. And so I miss him greatly. I'm honored and blessed to know him, and I feel privileged to have him in my life for as long as I did. And so that's really how I know Keith and how I met him. And I think you'll find consistency across the board with anyone that knew him. They just think the world of him. And he wasn't for everybody, but if he was your friend, he was your friend for life. And I really appreciate that.
Agree. And I admire the relationship that you guys had. Mark, if you had the opportunity to speak to him one last time, what would you say to him?
Well, the thing I would really make clear, and I mean crystal clear, because when you're friends with people, you typically tend to think that you'll see them again after you have a conversation. Just to make crystal clear to him how much he impacted me as a human being, as a coach, an instructor, even as a parent, because we would tell stories. So I would make crystal clear, and this is for everyone that's listening, if you have someone that's a positive influence in your life, such as Keith, be grateful. You are blessed beyond belief. And I hope that you realize it now and that you could tell them, because he really did mean the world to me as a friend and someone to talk to. So I would make sure that he knew that and that it was crystal clear.
And now a few words from Master Pedro Sauer.
So, Keith, my friend, what can I say about Keith Owen? Keith, I met Keith back in I want to say probably 92, 93 maybe. And Keith showed up in the school wearing a black gi, wearing a mustache. And he was a big kid, and it was Keith and Dean Halliman. There was another unbelievable, excellent, super nice guy from Boise, Idaho. Actually, from Twin Falls at the time. And anyway, Keith fell, the first time that Keith trained, it was the early days, so it was pretty rough. He was a big guy. He was trying hard. So anyway, but he fell in love with jiu-jitsu. And I remember his face, his demeanor, the way how he was smiling, the way how he was. And anyway, he just got hooked in jiu-jitsu. And he, both those two guys used to drive all the time from Twin Falls to Salt Lake City. And they used to take class on a weekend. And after that, Dean Halliman got some had diagnosed with some disease, and so had to get cancer treatment. So anyway, it was a normal drive for those guys coming from Twin Falls down to Salt Lake City. Mm-hmm. And we trained for a long time, and they are very dedicated guys. But one time they invited me to go to Twin Falls because Dean used to work in a racing track. He used to narrate races, and Keith was like, "Man, we've got to do something professional. We come here, kick our butt all the time. Let's take him to a track and we can get him back." And so they arranged in a track a guy with a water hose to be squirting water on the corners. And anyway, and the track was pretty much, it was just us there. And we went there to race. And, oh boy. So anyway, I raced in front of Dean and Keith Owen. It was 25 laps. I was 24 laps in the front of them.
on the last lap, I kind of slowed down, and I let those two guys pass me, and they passed with the biggest smile on the face. And it was so funny. It's like, I can't believe, Professor, you've been kicking our butt all the time. We had a chance to kick in the track to come here and just smoke us. So that was one of the things that I remember. And of course, on the mat, Keith was such a good ambassador. He always watched my back. He was somebody that I always watch for myself. Anytime, you can tell, every time he mentioned a move, a technique, no, Professor Sauer does like this. No, Professor Sauer, no, my professor. He was one of those guys that I always gave credit. You can tell he was humble, smart, he cared about jiu-jitsu. He just want to share mechanic, and look what he done. He come up with he was my first guy that I try out to create the Team Rhino. I had a meeting with Keith, and we talk about, Keith, let's try to start a sub-affiliate underneath of Federal Sauer. Just start it. Let's see how it goes. And he done it, and I helped him and push him, and he was very successful. Incredible talent guys came under Keith Owen. When I mean incredible talent, people who kind of study, understand curriculum, and they close out the holes. They are not slack people. They just, you can tell that Keith built good quality people. So there was Keith was one of those guys that any instructor would be very happy, would be very proud to have him around, because he was a good dude. Super nice guy.
Yes. Yeah, he was all those things you said, and certainly loyal, and certainly always thought the world of you. Is evident because he always gave you credit and always spoke so highly of you. So, I admire that relationship you guys had. Professor, if you had one more chance to speak with Keith, what would you say to him?
Well, my chance that I had a chance to tell him is that, my friend, you, your family, everybody else, don't worry. We, first of all, I'm super proud what you have done as a family, as a person, everything that you've done in your social life, everybody that you help it, and you don't have to worry about anything here. We are pretty much, eventually, we're going to go somewhere. It's going to be our time, and things happen for a reason, and we will never let your name, Team Rhino, and your family be left. We are going to team up, and anytime that I can be any help, we're going to be right there. I'm hoping that we can do next year some good event at Keith Owen area. So I'm not going to spill the beans yet, but we are planning something for next year. So that's the only thing I want to say, that next year we're going to be trying to get together.
Beautiful. Any last thoughts about Keith?
Yeah, that Keith, our friend, wait for me, because one day we're going to see each other again, amigo. And I really appreciate all those times that we spent together, my friend.
All right, here's a little more from Keith.
I always tell people the difference between Gracie Jiu-Jitsu and the sport Jiu-Jitsu, because they'll ask. And a lot of times they don't ask. They don't even know, and it takes them years to figure it out, is just add punches to your face, all right? If you want to know what Gracie Jiu-Jitsu is, just let me punch you in the face a few times, and you're going to get it real quick. There's a story about Grandmaster that I want to tell, and I don't even know if this is true. So this could be just a fable, but somebody told me a long time ago that somebody was there was this thing called the Spider Guard that had just come out at one time, and Grandmaster was doing a seminar, and a blue belt was asking Grandmaster about the Spider Guard. And Grandmaster kept putting it off and saying, it's not a self-defense, he didn't like it, it's not a self-defense move. But the blue belt kept pestering him about it and going, hey, well, what do you mean? What would be your defense against my Spider Guard? Because that was the new thing coming out, and I remember when it came out. So finally Grandmaster was tired of listening to this blue belt, so he said, hey, he through an interpreter said, hey, get me in Spider Guard. So the blue belt got him in this newfangled Spider Guard thing, and what Grandmaster did was he stood up, rotated the guy to the side where his head was to the side, and then Grandmaster took his foot and started stomping the mat right by his face. And the blue belt went, okay, I understand the difference now between the self-defense and the sport aspect of it. If you could take a foot to your face, it's probably not a good self-defense technique. I like what you said about having fun, and I think you just hit the nail on the head. Is if you're going to class and have to sit outside and huff and puff, getting yourself ready because you're about to get killed by all these guys, I mean, that pretty soon, man, you're not going to like that over the years. But if you come to class and go, I'm just going to have fun. If I get tapped, whatever, I'm going to do my best. I'm going to try to submit people, but I'm not going to get hurt, and I'm going to go in there and just have a good time. Master Sauer has made that clear to me. Just have a good time. And when your attitude is right like that and you get tapped, and I've been tapped 10,000 times, man, I still have a good time. I don't care. That you'll be more calm and able to deal, because you have to be in the present when you're grappling with people. And if you're freaking out and panicking, your mind stops working, and then you're just grasping for anything. You literally, when you're grappling, have to keep control of yourself. And I hate to say this, but I say this like, have you ever seen the movie Terminator, where you saw the inside of the Terminator's head and it's going through with red, things that it's adding everything up. Well, that's what you need to be, is you're adding everything up in your head because you're focused on everything and you see everything at that moment. But without having fun, man, it becomes a competition, and then you're going to try the same old tired crap that you've always done, and you won't get better. And it's about getting better. And I promise you, if you will have fun, things will be a lot easier, and you will get good, man.
All right, so I saved Charlene, Keith's wife, for last, and we're going to do that now. But Charlene, as you can imagine, still at this time finds it very difficult to speak about Keith without breaking down. So I can certainly understand and appreciate that, but she did want to be a part of this, so she wrote out a message, which I will share now. Thank you for dedicating this podcast to Keith, my husband, dad to Alexander, Kerrigan, and Chance, father-in-law to Madeline, and newly grandpa to Brooks, Keith, Owen. It is difficult to speak publicly about his passing, as my emotions are so raw still when thinking or speaking of him, so I appreciate being able to write my thoughts down. February 11th of this year forever changed our family and those who were close to him. Although it has been 5 months since his passing, it is still hard to grasp that he's gone. Being strong and positive for our boys and their families, our instructors at Team Rhino, and students is something that I focus on daily. Jiu-Jitsu has given Keith and I the opportunity to travel all over the world together, from Canada to London, Maui, Aruba, to our stateside affiliates with our own Team Rhino Association, along with attending the Pedro Sauer Association training camps. Keith was elated to be attending the camp at Professor Sauer's home in Petropolis, his dream vacation, training each day and spending time with Pedro and some of our Team Rhino affiliate owners, studio owners, and their students. I, on the other hand, as a mom, was hesitant to be so far away from my boys, even though they are adults in their late 20s, and our dogs, Rodeo and Mac. Keith and I are a team, and he would not go without me, so knowing how important this trip was, and after weeks of talking about it, I agreed to go. For me, this trip felt different. I wasn't too overly excited about it, more nervous and on edge. I asked a lot of what if this happens or what if that happens on this trip. So a few days prior to our departure from Brazil, Keith commented when discussing the trip, "We are going on an adventure." I panicked. Why would he call this trip an adventure? Keith called our business travels trips because adventures meant that something bad or unexpected would happen. He stated during the conversation, "When it's my time to go, it's my time," which, as you can imagine, made me more anxious. But really, what could happen, right? We were just going to Brazil for a week. It was a great week of training for Keith and everyone, meeting new people, laughing, spending time with our Team Rhino affiliates and friends, exploring the area, having deep conversations about jiu-jitsu with Professor Sauer, eating amazing food cooked by their chef, and overall, a relaxing vacation. On the day of the 11th, Keith wasn't feeling well, as were some others at the camp. The group had eaten in Rio the previous day, so Keith and I thought it was something he ate. He took a nap and still trained 2 times that day, but kept it kind of easy. That evening, everyone stayed up later than normal and eventually went to bed late that night. Keith did his normal reading in bed before he went to sleep. He was reading a book about George Washington. At this moment, I don't want to share the specifics of his death, but as many of you already know, he did pass away while next to me within a mere second. It was just Keith and I. There was no time to say or do anything. He was gone. We all at some point have put ourselves in someone else's shoes when they've lost someone and think, I would feel this way, or I can imagine, by your own feelings for a spouse, child, parent, or friend, what that would feel like losing someone. Now take that feeling and times it by 1,000,000. There is no preparation for losing someone you love within a second. No time to prepare or say that you love them. You appreciate them one more time. They are gone. We could write a book about the process of getting Keith home, the daily calls with Pedro still in Brazil with Keith, the calls with the U.S. and Brazilian embassy, the enormous amount of paperwork, then forgetting to leave his passport when I left and having to overnight it to Brazil. But it can't get to Pedro due to a mudslide in Petrópolis, killing over 100 people, which could have taken Keith's body as well. There was no time to grieve or process what had happened. It took 2.5 weeks for Keith to come home. It would not have been possible without Pedro staying so I could go back to the U.S. to be with the family. Keith was buried in one of Pedro's gis, which I'm not sure people know. It was a little small, but it worked, and it was an honor to our family that he chose to do that. A few weeks after Keith passed, on March 1st, we started the renovations of our new Team Rhino location that Keith and I designed last year. It has been difficult moving forward with the new location without him, but grateful it is what he created also. Keith and I were married 30 years and worked side by side for all those years building our business. How lucky we were to have the ability to do that. Keith was so excited to be a grandpa for the first time to Brooks. Teaching him jiu-jitsu, having him hang out on the mats at the studio with him. We are so very grateful for the footage of Keith that Brooks can watch as he grows, to see Grandpa teach at seminars, hear his voice in interviews. We are also grateful that our students and anyone can learn from Keith and his knowledge of jiu-jitsu through his videos and the book he wrote a few years ago, and seminar footage. Alexander, Chance, Kerrigan, Madeline, Kerrigan's wife, baby Brooks, and I will continue to heal, grow, and develop. I am proud of the studio Keith and I created over 30 years ago together. And we are all grateful that Team Rhino Gracie Jiu-Jitsu headquarters and our Team Rhino Association continue in his legacy. We are grateful for the continual support of the Jiu-Jitsu community. We got this. Man, what a beautiful and powerful message from Charlene. So grateful that she was a part of this, and so grateful to everyone that made this tribute special. We usually do a Make a Difference, Make an Impact segment at this time, but to end this episode, I'm just going to play some more clips of Keith sharing some of his knowledge and insights.
When I was going up to the martial arts, and I own a martial arts school, in the martial arts business, they would always say that you need to grow into the level that you want to accomplish. You need to be able to grow. And I was like, what the hell does that mean? I have to grow. I'm already mature. I mean, I got this. And over the years, I really got to see what that meant. You have to grow into the person that is capable of handling these goals. And I know that sounds weird because you're like, hey, I'm a grown man or woman, I can handle this. The thought process that you need to accomplish things, you have to develop yourself into that person. I think that's what Greg is saying. If you're not developed into that person, how can you handle that? Let me just use this as an example, and I'm not trying to get political here, but running for president, you have to be a certain kind of person, and not to handle the political side, let's just not talk about that, but the day-to-day work of what the president does, man. This guy gets up early in the morning, I don't care if it's Obama, Trump, Clinton, whatever, gets up early in the morning and starts their day off and continues and goes all single day, because that's what's expected of him. A regular person who has never been into that and suddenly gets thrust into a presidential kind of situation could never handle that. He'd be like, I need to take a break. I can't handle this. And so you have to be a person, you have to be the kind of person that can be able to handle the change that you want to affect in your life. Because if you don't, the growth isn't going to happen. And if you're not prepared to go to class and you don't feel like, oh, I can handle it, and I don't think I can handle going to class, you're not going to go to class. And that's just as simple as that. So as we're talking, work on yourself as a person. Greg hit it right on the head. You need to work on yourself as a human being in your personal life, in handling your spouse, your friends. And make yourself into that person. You can't just set a goal and then go out and try to achieve it without working on you as a person. And so if you're not growing, if you're like, oh, I don't know about goals and all that, I don't want to grow, it's okay, you won't grow. But then don't be unhappy that you didn't achieve what you wanted to achieve, because it's all about you. And again, that's what I was saying about controlling your mind, man, controlling your thinking every single day, staying on track. Don't get off track. Be the person that 365 days, I look at my goals and I'm trying to work towards them. Let me just add one more thing. And this was a big thing for me in the whole goal thing. When I would achieve goals and I wouldn't celebrate them. I wouldn't have any celebration over it. I would just achieve it, go mark it off. And then achieving the goals kind of didn't give me any satisfaction, because I would achieve them, but yet there was no celebration. And I think personally, anytime you achieve a goal or anytime you work towards a goal, you should have a little celebration thrown in there. Whether that's go out to dinner, whether that's, sit there and go, yes, or yell really loud or something like that, because that's what your mind needs. Your mind needs is success. And when we think success, you might as well throw yourself a success party every single time. And when you do that, it'll help you to carry on. Where I had to learn a lesson about, wow, I'm achieving all these goals and I'm not very happy. Need to celebrate a little bit more. And I found that made me want to achieve more goals. Well, I'm no motivational speaker, and I don't claim to be. If you don't want to do anything with your life and you don't want to achieve your goals, I think that's perfectly all right, because we need people in society to do the mundane things and hate their job and go to it and just get it done, to support people like me who are attaining their goals. And I know, this is a great way to wreck things right at the end. But if you don't want to change your life, heck, man, it's not going to worry me whatsoever, because we're all responsible for my life. You guys didn't get up this morning and go, I wonder if Keith Owen's attaining his goals today. Everybody's worried about themselves, and you choose the path that you're on. And if your path has no goals in it and don't want to achieve anything and just want to exist from day to day, God bless you for it, because I only want to deal with people that want to succeed, and that's who I'm into. All right, and it's not bad, it's not good, it's just the way life is. Over the centuries and the millennia, there have been people who've never achieved anything. But if you want to achieve something, it's all going to start with the goals. Starting to work with them, make them habits, make them routines. And I just want to leave you with this. If you do want to change your life, It doesn't matter how much money I have. It doesn't matter how much money anybody else has. We have the same 24-hour period as everybody else. All the rich people have 24 hours, so do we. It's what you achieve in that time period that's going to define you as a human being. So if you're constantly achieving and moving and going in that direction, you will have success. And if you want to sit still, more power to you, but just don't complain when it doesn't work out the way you wanted it to, because you just made a wish and didn't want to put the work in.
And that's going to do it for this edition of the show. As always, I thank you for listening. Hope you're enjoying the show. If you feel like you're benefiting from the show and want to show your support, you can support us on our Patreon page, and a link in the show notes. Please like and follow us on social media and help us spread the word by reposting our posts and telling others about the show. You can leave comments on the website at www.GJJR.com. You can also go to iTunes and leave comments, as well as rate the show, and we would appreciate a 5-star rating, which helps us with our standing in iTunes. You can also leave comments on our YouTube channel. If you have suggestions for the show, please don't hesitate to give those. We always like feedback and suggestions. Okay, that's going to do it. So until next time, this is Marty Josie, and I'll see you on the mat.